The observation deck of the galactic youth education vessel Harmony's Promise hummed with the excited chatter of 24 cubs from across 7 species. They had gathered for their weekly cultural exchange session, where they would observe and learn from their human liaison officer. Today's lesson was supposed to be about daily human routines. Vexy, a young Corthian with silver fur that rippled like liquid mercury, pressed her 3-fingered hands against the transparent aluminum barrier. Her species had evolved on a low-gravity world, where conflict was resolved through elaborate dancing and the exchange of scented oils. The concept of violence was as foreign to her kind as breathing underwater would be to humans. "Is the human ready?" chirped Pix, a crystalline lumine who refracted light into rainbow patterns across the deck. "She's coming," Vexy responded, her translator collar converting her melodic tones into galactic standard. Kara Flint walked into the demonstration chamber below, carrying a thermal container of what the cubs had learned was called coffee. She wore her standard off-duty attire: a simple gray shirt, dark pants, and unlaced boots. Her brown hair was tied back in what she'd explained was called a ponytail. She looked, by all measures, entirely ordinary. "Good morning, everyone," Kara said, her voice carrying through the chamber's audio system. "Today, we're going to do something simple. I'm just going to get ready for my daily workout routine." The cubs settled down, their various appendages, wings, and sensory organs oriented toward the human below. Kara sat on a bench and pulled on her first boot. Then she began to tighten the laces. The sound was subtle at first, a rhythmic pulling, a whisper of synthetic fiber against itself, the slight grunt of effort as she worked her way up the boot. But in the observation deck, Vexy's ears, far more sensitive than human ones, caught every nuance. The tightening intensified. Kara's jaw set with determination as she pulled harder, creating a pattern of sounds. Pull. 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 Yank. Vexy's fur began to stand on end. In Corthian physiology, such deliberate, forceful, repetitive actions only occurred during one scenario: preparation for mortal combat. The intensity in Kara's expression, the methodical way she secured each section of the boot, the growing tightness of the laces, it all triggered something primal in Vexy's evolutionary memory. She's preparing for battle," Vexy whispered, her voice trembling. "What?" Pix's crystalline form flickered with concern. Kara moved to the second boot, and the sounds doubled. Pull. Pull. Yank. Pull. Her face showed concentration, almost grimness. "Battle preparation!" Vexy suddenly shrieked, her fur now standing completely vertical, making her appear twice her normal size. "The human is entering war mode." Chaos erupted in the observation deck. The luminae began flashing emergency colors. A young Tenthari curled into a defensive ball. The 2 Vexolian cubs released their species equivalent of a distress pheromone, which smelled distinctly like burned sugar and triggered everyone else's panic responses. "Alert the commander," someone screamed. Below, Kara had finished with her boots and stood up, completely oblivious to the pandemonium above. She began doing what she called stretches, bending down to touch her toes, reaching her arms overhead, rotating her neck. To the terrified cubs, it looked like a war dance. "She's limbering up for combat," Vexy wailed, now backed against the far wall of the observation deck. Humans only prepare this thoroughly when they expect significant resistance. The emergency alarm began blaring. Within seconds, Commander Thrace, a veteran Corthian with gray-streaked fur, burst onto the observation deck. "Report!" he barked. "The human," Vexy gasped, pointing with a shaking hand. "She's entered a pre-combat state. Look at how she secured her foot coverings, the intensity, the determination. She's preparing for war." Commander Thrace looked down at Kara, who was now jogging in place, her boots making soft, thumping sounds against the demonstration chamber floor. The commander's whiskers twitched, then twitched again. His shoulders began to shake. "Commander?" Vexy asked uncertainly. Commander Thrace began to laugh, a deep, rumbling sound that the cubs had never heard from their normally stoic leader. He laughed so hard he had to lean against the wall for support. "Young ones," he finally managed, wiping tears from his large eyes. The human is not preparing for war. She's preparing for exercise. But the boot tightening, Vexi protested. The intensity, the focus. Humans, Commander Thrace explained, still chuckling, approach everything with that level of intensity. They tie their boots that tightly to protect their ankles during physical activity. It's a safety measure, not a war preparation. Down below, Kara had started doing jumping jacks, still completely unaware of what had transpired above. This, Commander Thrace continued, his voice warm with affection and something like admiration, is what makes humans so fascinating. They bring the focus and determination of warriors to the most mundane tasks. When they cook with passion. When they clean with purpose. When they tie their boots, he gestured to the chamber below, they tie them as if preparing for battle. Even when they're just going for a morning run, Vexi's fur slowly began to settle. So, she does this every day? Every single day, the commander confirmed. And this is a crucial lesson for all of you. Humans survived on a death world, a planet with predators, diseases, natural disasters, and countless other dangers. They evolved to treat every task as if their survival depended on it. It's not aggression, it's thoroughness. It's their way of respecting even simple activities. Pix flickered with curiosity. So, when humans prepare for actual battle, then, Commander Thrace said softly, you see this intensity multiplied tenfold. Humans don't have different modes for daily life and warfare. They simply have one mode, their absolute best. This is why, despite being relatively new to the galactic community, they've become invaluable as engineers, doctors, explorers, and yes, when absolutely necessary, as defenders. Down in the chamber, Kara had finished her warm-up and was waving cheerfully at the observation deck, still having no idea about the panic she'd inadvertently caused. Vexi watched the human with new understanding dawning in her large eyes. So, every human does everything like it's the most important thing in the universe? Not quite, Commander Thrace smiled. But they do bring a level of commitment to ordinary tasks that most species reserve for emergencies. It's exhausting to watch sometimes, inefficient by our standards often, but... He paused, looking at Kara with genuine respect. It's also magnificent. Humans don't do anything halfway. The cubs gradually returned to the barrier, watching as Kara began her actual workout routine which, ironically, looked far less intimidating than her boot-tying ceremony had been. Vexi's fur had completely settled now, and she found herself fascinated rather than frightened. I wonder, she mused aloud, what it's like to live every day as if it matters that much. That, young one, Commander Thrace said, placing a gentle paw on her shoulder, is the human condition, and perhaps that's the real lesson for today. When you live on a world that's constantly trying to kill you, you learn to tie your boots very, very tight. Below, Kara took a sip of her coffee and gave them a thumbs up, ready to begin the actual cultural exchange. The cubs, now considerably less terrified and infinitely more intrigued, settled in to learn what other ordinary human behaviors might accidentally trigger galactic incidents. War hadn't started that day on the Harmony's Promise, but the cubs had learned something far more valuable, that humans brought the ferocity of warriors to the art of simply being alive, and in a dangerous galaxy, perhaps that wasn't such a bad thing after all.